time ago, in a distant galaxy far, far away, lay a colony of exploratory, chameleon-like beings, eager to traverse where no one had ever gone before. Constructing a suitable vessel, they sent forth their most prized possession into the stratosphere, a brilliantly intelligent, imaginative, at times even clairvoyant elder being known only as Steve. Steve journeyed for millennia, arriving at last upon Earth, where he began to walk, changeling amongst us, undetected, gathering information on our species, technologies, intelligence, and dreams. Decades wore by. Ideologies and infrastructures evolved. Human beings began interacting and experimenting increasingly within a new field they named computing. And Steve saw that within their fascination lay their very future. Here today, then, ladies and gentlemen, to tell you all of that future is our very own clairvoyant, chameleon-like elder being, Steve Brown.
Alors, merci Vincent, formidable. Bonjour tout le monde, je m'appelle Steve Brown et je suis très heureux d'être ici à Montreal, C2MTL, fantastique. Montreal is an amazing, amazing city. This is my first trip and you've made me incredibly welcome. Thank you. Now you heard from John earlier about love, and I'm going to open by telling you about the first time that I fell in love. The first time that I fell in love, I was 10 years old. Star Wars was in the movie theaters. Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader battling it out. And my mother was doing a degree. She was doing a degree, she was in university. And my father needed to get me and my sister out of the house. He was a physics lecturer at the time. He worked at Loughborough University, and he worked in low temperature physics. And to get us away, he would take us to his laboratory. And it was a place filled with copper pipes and weird sounding things that went whiz, and this is what it looked like. This was my dad with a crazy 80s and 70s beard. And he would do everything he could to keep us interested, me and my sister. She's a couple of years younger than me. And he'd pour liquid nitrogen on the floor, and it would be like a bad 70s pop video. And that would keep our attention for all of about 2 minutes. And then he would, what do I do with them? And he would put us on the computer. You see in the corner here, a Commodore PET. This was the first love of my life. It wasn't a pretty blonde or a pretty brunette. That would come later. It was a Commodore PET. And I learned to program that thing. And in that instant, that first time I met it, what I realized was this thing called a computer was going to change the world. And I wanted to be part of that. And when I was 10, I knew that, and I knew that I wanted to work for a company like Intel. Now, why? It's because computers have changed our world. They make our cars safer. They allow animators with incredible vision to make wonderful movies that put smiles on the faces of children around the world. And they help to develop new drugs. Pharmaceutical companies are constantly doing research, and one of the most powerful tools that they have is giant computers that allow them to look at protein folding and look at how look at how new drugs might affect humans. That's particularly important for me because my grandmother, I watched her die and wither with Alzheimer's disease. And as I was watching that happen, I thought, damn it, why are we too late? Why couldn't we have enough compute power that the drug companies were able to do the research to not have her robbed of her dignity? So you want to know why I work for a company like Intel, why I work for Intel? The paycheck's nice, but it's because the products that we use, people like you stand on our shoulders and get to change the world with them. That's what drives us. The products that we make, this is an artistic crowd, a creative crowd. They are products of incredible beauty. The chips that we make, you may not have seen one before because they're buried inside your computers, but this is a wafer. We make our chips on these giant wafers. This has, I don't know how many chips, a couple hundred Intel chips on them. One of our latest core microprocessors. And we slice this up with a diamond saw to make the tiny little chips. And I'll show you what they look like in a minute. And then they get embedded inside a piece of plastic with legs on, and that goes inside the computers that you all use. So that's what a wafer looks like. But these are objects of incredible beauty. You look up close to them, these are the most complex machines known to mankind. They're absolutely gorgeous. You look up close enough, the detail on them, this is like the detail of an entire giant city map captured on a tiny piece of silicon that'll fit on the pad of your fingertip. So it's incredible complexity shrunk down, incredibly small, onto something that will fit on the tip of your finger.
Wow.
Wow, that's it?
It's got purples and greens and blues.
Looks like something out of Star Trek.
It looks very complicated.
Am I gonna break it?
It looks like a little solar panel.
It's like a little world in a piece of glass. Look how tiny that is.
It looks like a mirror.
It's beautiful. What is it?
So this is what makes my computer tick. This is what makes it all happen. This little thing. This is so tiny.
Stuff like this just boggles my mind. It's amazing. That's it. This is the processor. This is it.
We can create presentations. We can make PowerPoints. We write reports.
It saves me time and it makes me money. And what more can you ask?
I mean, if it wasn't for this, I wouldn't have a job.
I manage over 2,000 end users, and this helps me just manage their computers and any kind of problems that come up just from where I'm sitting.
15 different programs running all at the same time, and I got to be able to switch between them, and clearly this thing makes all of that happen.
I couldn't teach my class without this.
It just helps to speed the process of healing and recovery.
Smart.
I'm here in America all by myself, and this really allows me to connect with my family in Beijing.
This lets me play video games with people in Iceland.
This is the thing that lets me make movies.
This is what lets me play my music loud.
This little thing is my lifeline to the world.
Well, I think that's pretty fantastic that this little thing makes so much possible.
If this chip danced, it would make Fred Astaire cry.
Isn't that great? Making these chips, it turns out, ain't easy. They are incredibly complex technologies. The other thing that keeps me working there is these chips are incredible high technology. Let me give you a little flavor for what I mean by that. I realize this is like a catwalk. I'm between Bobby Brown and DVF. This is what they're wearing in the future. The purple. You like that? Okay. So, incredible technology. All of these chips, they're made up of tiny little switches made on transistors. A transistor is fundamentally a switch. Our latest chips have over 1 billion of these transistors, and they can turn on and off billions of times a second. You take enough of these transistors and you put them together, you can create these complex structures that give you all of the capabilities that computers have today. Each of those transistors is so tiny, there's no way you could see it with the human eye. In fact, 4,000 of these tiny transistors, if you put them side to side, would fit across the width of a human hair. And just saying human hair bothers me because those days are gone for me. But if you had a human hair, if you have one, pluck it out, look at it, and imagine 4,000 tiny transistors spread across that. To make these chips, where things are that small, a tiny speck of dust can ruin an entire product or entire product line. And so we make them in very, very clean environments that are 10,000 times cleaner than an operating theater. That's why you see one of our workers here wearing this dust outfit, a bunny suit. They change the air in our factories 6 times every minute, completely. It's an absolutely incredible environment. Building these factories doesn't come cheap. I looked at the top 3 tallest buildings in the world a couple of years ago and looked at the price tags on them. They add up, if you take the Burj Khalifa, Petronas Towers, and Taipei 101, they add up to roughly $5 billion. Just one of Intel's newest factories has a price tag of $6 billion. $6 billion. And the way that we do is because we're such a forward-looking business. Our ex-CEO, Paul Ottolini, said something I really like. He had a great quote. He said, "We dig a very big hole in the ground, spend $6 billion to build a factory in it, which takes 3 years, to produce technology we haven't invented yet, to run products we haven't designed yet, for markets which don't yet exist." Oh, and we do that 2 or 3 times a year, because we have multiple of these factories. So this is one of these things which is like go big or go home. This is a business in scale. We're pumping out hundreds of millions of these chips every year. So that's a little bit about Intel, because I was talking to Will, who's the president of Sid Lee, that helps put on this event. He said, you should just sort of introduce yourself a bit. So that was the introduction. Now let's talk about creativity and commerce. When I think about creativity, to me it is the coming together of 2 things that make something new. Whether it is you putting paint onto a canvas and making art, or taking 2 halves of an idea and putting them together. What you're really trying to do is come up with something that is more than the sum of the 2 parts. To take you to a new place, perhaps even. To get you to somewhere entirely new and unexpected. And what I want to talk to you about today is this idea of taking computing and applying it to things, because it changes them forever. I'll give you an example. You can see a couple of headlamps here on cars. They're about 100 years apart. They've changed a little bit. You can see that they're different. But fundamentally, it's a lamp with light coming out it, shooting forwards. That's it. It's been great for 100 years. But what happens if you put a computer in a headlamp? What does that do? Well, it turns out some researchers that we're working with have done exactly that. You combine computing, a camera, a projector into a lamp. One of the issues we have with headlamps is, and you've all experienced this, I'm sure, if it's raining hard or it's snowing and you put your brights on, all of the light is reflecting back off the rain droplets, and you really have, so you have to dip your lights. You don't get very good visibility. What if your computer was good enough and you had a camera looking out the front of the car so it could track the raindrops falling in real time and could use the projector to basically shoot the light between the raindrops as they fall? Now it's not reflecting back off the raindrops. Turns out it works pretty darn well. This is the sort of a before and after. You can see where they're using it on the right there. It makes a tremendous difference in rain. And I'm going to show you a quick video clip here that shows you it even works in snow. So here it is. Switch it on. Dink. Suddenly, you can see a lot better driving in snow too. So it's by taking an object, like the simple headlight, and combining it with computing intelligence, suddenly you get the ability to see through rain. Similarly, take a mirror and add computing intelligence into it, you get a completely different experience in a retail environment. I have a camera, I have a screen that looks like a mirror, I see myself, but now I can try clothes on virtually and see how they will fit on my body. We'll add computing technology into cameras and change cameras and photography for the first time fundamentally in 150 years and reinvent photography. I'm not going to say any more about that today, but stay tuned for a couple of years from now. And finally, I know there's a few aerospace folks in the audience here. What if you took a wing and computerized that, put intelligence in it? What would that do? I think we could have an aviation breakthrough. I was talking with 3 guys who work at UC Berkeley a couple of weeks ago, and they're working on a completely new way of controlling wings and flight. They have this like conveyor belt thing that's computer controlled, so it monitors the airflow, looks at fluid dynamics. It needs a lot of floating point calculations for this. You look at the fluid dynamics around a wing, you control this conveyor belt thingy. I'm not an aerospace expert, can you tell? And it gives you 100% more lift and 40% less drag, and it doesn't stall as bad as it used to in planes. So if you're an aerospace person, you want to speak to these folks. This is fascinating stuff. And they really can make a difference. This is a picture showing the airflow of the wings. It makes a dramatic difference. So they're in the research stages, but looking to figure out how they could retrofit airplanes out there. Imagine what that would do to fuel consumption. So computing transforms objects. I've given you a few ideas on that. It also transforms industries and potentially transforms societies, and has been transforming societies for decades. So let's talk now about how computing transforms industries. I know you're from all different walks of life and all different industries. I guess my macro message here is computing will transform your industry next if it hasn't done so already. So one industry that I know we have a lot of representation from in this room, we'll get to in a minute, is media. But the way I think about this transformation that computing brings, comes to mind to me as one of my favorite guys, Arthur C. Clarke, who was a sci-fi writer, futurist, and inventor of the communications satellite. He said, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And that's the way I think of computing. Computing is like this magic wave that flows through the world over time. And as computing gets more and more capable, it's able to transform more and more and more things. In the media industry, media and publishing, we've seen fairly dramatic changes in that industry in the last 30 years. And there's that wave has sort of swept across the industry and transformed everything from the production capabilities through distribution and now consumption. All of these things slowly, as computers were more and more powerful, have toppled, and you've seen massive disruption and lots more capabilities and the ability for creative people to be much more creative. The last sort of bastion I think that will change there is digital storytelling, and that's the next 5 to 10 years. But creating rich digital environments with digital actors and giving a really interesting canvas for storytellers to practice their craft. So you've seen these big changes in media and publishing, but if you think about other major sectors, we haven't seen that much of a change. Sure, in healthcare, I told you, protein folding, big computers, drug research, and that's great. But fundamentally, the way that we receive healthcare hasn't changed a lot in 150 years. I mean, we still go in the damn doctor's office, and there's a computer in there, sure, but she still makes me fill out a form every time I go there. What's that about? It's just, so it's really not encroached into healthcare that much yet. A little bit in retail, some in manufacturing, really just scratching the surface of transportation. As my job as a futurist, I'm looking out 10, 20 years. And what I see in every one of these sectors and others is that computing performance gets to the point where you will see as much of a flip, as much of a disruption and transformation in each of these sectors in the next 10 to 20 years as we have seen in media and publishing in the last 10 to 30. So watch out, lots of change coming, and all, I think, for the better. But this magic wave of computing, what does it look like? What are its constituent parts? There are lots of pieces to it. But there are sort of 3 big bits that I think are interesting to think about. The first one, actually, Philip Stark. I didn't expect Philip Stark to say something that would be like, he stole part of my keynote, damn it. Because he talked about dematerialization. Remember that? And what he was talking about is how computing is going to shrink, shrink, shrink over time. If you think back to the 1960s, a computer was something that you could only get to if you were lucky, right? You went to a room, and you were a researcher or an academic, and you had to go and sort of worship the beast. And it wasn't very capable, but it filled an entire room. In the 70s, they shrunk down to mini computers. In the 80s, we started to see them come into our homes. In the 90s, you saw computers start to be available much more broadly. And in 2003, when Intel brought out Centrino and sort of started the Wi-Fi revolution, suddenly we could take them to the coffee shop with us and look cool. Now we're clearly firmly in the mobile era, but what's next is that computing continues to get smaller. And meaningful amounts of computing, you can imagine going into anything and everything. Everything can be turned into a computer. You can put computer in your clothing. You can put computer in the mirror. You can put computing into every part of the fabric of our lives. Once you do that, once it's ubiquitous, you can start to think about changing every single object, transforming, delivering new products and new types of services. So the one big trend, the first big trend in this computing wave, this magical wave, is small. Everything's going to get small, and it makes a lot of things suddenly possible. The second thing is computers are getting bigger. Those room-sized computers still exist. And they're really important because you want to take, we're generating vast amounts of information as a species, and all that information is going somewhere. And if you can take information and you can use a big fat computer like the one you see in this picture here, and you can crunch all of that information, you can turn it into wisdom and insight. And then you can make decisions based on that. You're seeing analytics show up for retail companies trying to figure out what are the latest trends? How do I get ahead of that? How do I make sure that I have the right things in the right place for consumers based on what's being bought? You see the Center for Disease Control looking at search, what people are searching for on Google and Bing and other search engines, and based on what they're searching for, they can predict outbreaks of diseases. To do that, you have to have big fat computers that do this. But it's a huge opportunity to really analyze things and make breakthroughs. So the second big piece of that wave is big. The third piece is fascinating to me, and this is the bit that sort of gives me goosebumps. We are on the edge of the Cambrian era of computing. So the Cambrian era of evolution was when when animals developed, evolved eyes. In the next 10 years, you're going to see computers evolve eyes and ears. The ability to really, truly see the world. I'm not talking about a video feed going into a computer. What I'm talking about is a computer that actually can see and understand what it's seeing. What are the objects in its field of view? How do they relate to each other? Who is that face? Have I met them before? Once you can do that, suddenly all bets are off. You can do all kinds of things. Computers have been blind and just unable to really understand the world until now. Robots become a reality. If you think the internet wave was a huge game changer for the planet, you're right. What's the next wave? In my view, robots. So, third big piece of that magic wave, eyes and ears. If you take those three big trends and you look at how they intersect with each of those major industry sectors, at every intersection is an opportunity. And it's an opportunity for the people in this room. One of the things I've really enjoyed about being here is you're really freaking smart. I've had some great conversations with a whole bunch of you, and I can't wait to spend time with more of you. Not only are you smart and passionate, but you know how to get things done. So I present this to you as, here's some cool stuff that we could go do. And if you look at some of the intersections of these, let me just run you through a few. I told you about the magic mirror already. Once you apply a small amount of compute power to a mirror in a store, or maybe a mirror in your own home, suddenly you can start to think about turning that into a magic mirror. Lots of opportunity there. An artist friend of mine drew these. I think they're awesome. So if you take a lot of computing power and you can stick it into a car and combine it with the ability to have the eyes and ears I mentioned before, suddenly you get a self-driving car. We're having a huge wave, the silver wave, I keep being told. People like me, 10, 20 years from now, we're going to be retiring. There's a whole bunch of you in this room too. And we're going to need something or someone to take care of us. And economically, there is just no way that the healthcare infrastructure that we have in place today, you cannot build enough hospitals, you cannot train enough doctors, hire enough nurses, you just can't do it to do healthcare the way we do it today. The only way that we will handle this silver wave of retirees is to be able to help them live productively and healthily and comfortably in their own homes. Some of that we can do with help from robotics. So, have anybody seen Frank and the Robot and Frank? If you haven't seen that movie, you should go see it. It's a great movie. Frank Langella is just on fire. But it also gives you an interesting glimpse into what might be possible in the future. And finally, if you can make computing effectively zero cost, zero size, zero power consumption, which is what we're headed towards, you can start to think about wearables, whether they're for monitoring your health or for doing other functions, and even ingestible computing. Computing that you can take in pill form that goes in one end and out the other, and on its way through can monitor you and report out on what it sees along the way. So a very helpful tool in medicine. So at every one of these intersections, there is opportunity. And I would argue there's endless opportunity. What I'm here to tell you today is, on the technology side of things, you're going to see, if you think we've had an amazing 10 years technologically, just wait. You know, what's coming in the next 10 years is going to just dwarf what we've gone through. The technology is going to take care of itself. Assume the technology is done, that computing will go to zero, zero cost, zero power, zero physical size. And then imagine, what could I do with that? Barriers still exist, though. And we're going to have to overcome those barriers, and these are legal barriers, they are cultural barriers, there are things that stop these things happening. If I think about the Google car, they'll have it nailed, so that, you know, when Intel gives them enough performance in the chips and their algorithms get better, they'll have self-driving cars, and all the other car manufacturers are working on this too. I think we're probably 3 to 5 years away from that. But will we see cars on the road 3 to 5 years from now? Probably not, because of the liability issues and risk profiles, and there's a whole bunch of barriers that will stop us. So we have to overcome those barriers, but we also need to be figuring out what are the right experiences we want to deliver to people. I want to talk about that briefly. For the longest time, Intel's been making transistors, and we come up with the best transistors we can, we put them into chips, and then we give them sort of to the world. And smart people, software developers, come and develop new applications, and hopefully they deliver new experiences. And that's worked very well for the longest time, because we were doing that on the sort of Swiss Army knife of computing, the PC. Now that computing is going everywhere, it's much more sort of purpose-built, purpose-driven. And when you're designing this stuff, you have to know, how is it going to be used? What's the experience I'm trying to deliver? And so at Intel, you've seen the company turn completely around, because all these arrows turn upside down. We now start with experience first. What are the experiences you want to deliver? What software is needed to deliver that experience? And then what are the chips and transistors we have to build to make that possible? Now the smart ones in the audience will have figured out, there's a gap. His slides have been pretty okay so far, but there's a big gap at the top there, above user experience. That's because in order to know what experiences to go and build, you have to understand what people want. It's very simple. What are users' needs and wants? Well, if you look at some of the tech industry's glossy photographs of the future, dun, 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 dun. And this is one I picked from Intel, so I'll pick on Intel's marketing department as much as anybody else. We love, because we all want to see this, right? Look at that. Look how beautiful that is. The world's a perfect place. There's no chewing gum on the street. There's no dog shit, nothing. It's immaculate. Yeah, I want that world. And there's no traffic on the roads. It's a beautiful place. Puppy. And when we go to the stores, everybody's wearing Armani, looking fabulous. There's no one else there. And we want to deliver these amazing experiences. But I actually work in Intel's labs. I'm a double E. I'm trained as a geek a long time ago. But I work for an anthropologist. My boss is this crazy smart, foul-mouthed, fantastic Australian called Genevieve Bell, Dr. Genevieve Bell. She's a PhD anthropologist from Stanford, and we have a whole team of people at Intel. And their job is to go and understand, how do people actually live their lives? So we have ethnographers, anthropologists, and we go and do 250,000 interviews in people's homes, studying how they live, what they need, and how we can help them. And when we do those types of interviews, this is the house people live in, we would say in the future, where there's no furniture. This is the way people really live, right? This is a guy in China. This is his life, you know. And it turns out this is what most of our lives are like. So the reality is nothing like we paint in some of these pictures. As we do these interviews, as we travel the world, and we travel, 100 countries around the world, what we find is that there are 6 common things that people say they want or they need. This is Maslow's hierarchy aside. Once you have safety and shelter and all those things, what are the things you want from life? And the same things come up over and over and over again. And they're this: People just want to get things done. And that's what the tech industry is really focused on mostly for the last 30 years or so. They also want to learn and grow. They want to feel connected to each other, to the people they love, the people they care about, and in a business context, to their suppliers and customers. They want to monitor their own personal wellness and the wellness of the people that they care about. They want to express their creativity, and they want to do that in a way that sets them free. And also, when it's appropriate, can't do it all the time, they want to be entertained. These are 6 very basic things. And Intel is focusing its research, and I know there's a lot of people in this room who are thinking about this too, on how do we meet these fundamental needs? What are the experiences we can create to help meet these needs? I threw a lot of stuff at you in the last 20 minutes or so. So let's just take a pause for a minute. Because there is so much opportunity, there is so much that will change in the next 10 years or so, 20 years. It can be a little bit breathtaking. I said before that computing changes objects, it changes industries, and it changes societies. Technology has a way of doing that. And I think about, sort of inspired by Steve Jobs' liberal arts and technology intersection, that culture and technology have this major intersection. One informs the other. And sometimes it can be a clash. We've had to have those conversations, right? How does computing inform? In the 70s, we got TVs in our homes. We had to have that conversation. Are we the kind of family that has the TV on when we have dinner or not? Is it okay to use a cell phone at dinner under the table sneakily or not? I was in New Zealand a few years ago. This magical place called Cape Reinga, the very north island, at the north tip of the North Island of New Zealand. This is the place where all the indigenous Maori people believe wherever they are in the world, their soul goes to before it goes to the underworld. It's a magical place right at the tip there between the Pacific Ocean and the Tasman Sea. And I thought of these just the 2 names on a map to help make it easy to find your way around a globe. But it turns out these are 2 separate bodies of water. And you can actually see it when you stand at this point. 2 bodies of water crashing together and then moving seamlessly into one single body. I think of this as the same way that technology and culture come together. One informs the other. At first, there's a clash, but slowly they seamlessly merge into one whole. I want to leave you some final thoughts. First one is, what will you do next with computing? This is an inspiring group of people in this room. The message I wanted to give you is, computing is going to be there for you in boundless ways. And to think about how can I combine that with something to make something new and exciting. Secondly, there's so much we can do. Let's focus our attention by thinking about what are the experiences that people want in their lives based on those 6 human needs. And as we think about the interaction of culture and technology, we had the 70s to talk about TVs, we're talking about cell phones now. We're going to have this conversation more and more and more regularly. Not every decade, not every year, but every week. As some new technology comes, we have to figure out how do we incorporate this into our culture and our society. I think we need a framework to think about that. And the framework I offer you is, does this make us better human beings? Now, I can't tell you what better human means. We all have to look inside ourselves, understand what does it mean to me as an individual? What does it mean to my family? What does it mean to my company, to my society? But let's be having that conversation ahead of time, because technology is coming at us so fast, we'll need that framework to be able to deal with those questions very rapidly. It's been an absolute pleasure to be here and talk with you today. I hope that you've thought a little bit differently about the future and maybe what's possible. I can't wait to spend time with you, but I just want to engage you all and say, the world is going to be a better place if we can make it more intelligent and more simple to live in. So please join me in embracing this technology that comes and figuring out how to make the absolute most of it. Thank you for your time. Merci bien.